Konnichiwa! O genki desu ka? Now I'm out of Japanese. This week we're going to take a look at a book called The Secret of the Blue Glass, written by Tomiko Inui. This is a Japanese book. It was actually written in about 1956, I believe, but it's only recently been translated into English. I suppose you would call it a historical fantasy story, because it is set in the Second World War in Japan, and it's about a family. Well, it's about two families really, one that's got something slightly different about them. So first of all, we'll have a look at the plot, and then I'll let you know what I thought about The Secret of the Blue Glass. This is a story about a Japanese family. Well, actually, it's about two Japanese families. At the beginning of the book, we're given this race through time at the end of the Meiji period. We have a young boy named Tatsuo, who here is actually older, and he's saying goodbye to his English tutor, who is actually English. She is returning back to England, but she leaves in Tatsuo's care a very special and important gift, and that is the little people. Now, at the beginning, we have a couple called Balbo and Fern, and they can't make the journey back to England with the English tutor because they're actually pregnant and about to have another child. In the end, they have two children called Robin and Iris. Now, part of Tatsuo's duties that is bestowed upon him is that every day he must pour milk into a blue glass for the little people, because that's what they eat, that's what they drink, that's what they need to survive. So it's his duty to look after the little people, who then start living in his house, by pouring milk into the blue glass every day. Now, as Tatsuo gets older, he passes on the duty of looking after the little people to his soon-to-be wife, Toko, who then starts the same duty of pouring milk into the blue glass for the little people that live in their house. Soon that duty of looking after little people is passed on to their eldest son, Tetsu, who looks after little people and pours their milk. Then he becomes too old, and he passes on his responsibility to his younger brother, Shin. Now, Shin is slightly different to the other children because he's a little bit more angry. He's a bit more angry, and soon he gets tired of his duty of filling the milk for the little people. So he passes the duty on to his younger sister called Yuri, who has an illness as well. She's a very weak child, but she spends all her time looking after the little people, going to school, making sure there's enough milk. And this is where the story really begins, with this family, the Moriyama family, and the little people who are the Ash family. And everything is going fine, but in the background we have the rumblings of the Second World War as Japan goes out and invades other countries. And soon enough, their little world in which the little people live is put under threat when armed men arrive at the Moriyama family household and arrest their father, Tatsuo, and take him away, because he's been accused of being a traitor to the Japanese nation. I believe he's an English scholar, so maybe we're not really filled in on that totally. And that's where the story really starts to pick up, because within this household that Toko is trying to keep together, Tetsu soon goes off to university, Shin becomes a very patriotic boy and is often critical of his dad. And soon the war grows ever and ever closer, until it arrives in Tokyo, where they live. They are so scared of the bombing raids that have started across the country that they feel that it is time, well, Toko feels that it is time that Yuri is evacuated. So Yuri packs her bags and travels to the countryside with her elder brother Tetsu to live in the countryside to avoid the bombs and the flames that may be coming to Tokyo. She takes with her the little people so that they will be safe as well, along with their blue glass. And from there, it is an exploration of how Yuri deals with being in a new place, with a father who is accused of being a traitor, and the pains of looking after the little people, especially as rationing kicks in and milk is harder and harder to find. And that's the plot of The Secret of the Blue Glass. The Secret of the Blue Glass. I have to say that I found this actually quite a fascinating read. However, it was a book of two parts for me. The two parts were the story itself and the actual writing. So I'll just go over those and let you know what I thought. The story itself I found fascinating because I'd never read anything or really done any research into life in Japan during the Second World War, and it was really interesting to see that side. You know, I suppose as I've gone through my education, we've learnt about, say, evacuees in Britain leaving the cities, but I'd never really considered what it was like for Japanese children and Japanese families during the Second World War and the evacuation that they went through. And it was really interesting to see the difference. There weren't too many differences. It's still the same kind of experiences. I liked the story. It was really quite interesting. It took me a while to get into, but you've got these two families. You've got the Moriyama family and, well, the Ash family, which are the little people, and the Moriyama are the, I suppose, big people you call them. And their stories almost run side by side. It's almost a story about growing up to some extent, because with the Ash family, as their children, the little people, as they get older, their children want to explore the world. They don't want to be confined with the same rules that the little people have to obey. But they stick together even as they're going through that, even though their parents are worried. But for the Moriyama family, they go through the similar transition, and you see the children grow up. But their family kind of fractures and falls apart despite the best efforts of the mother. And that's really interesting to see that relationship. And with the three children in the Moriyama family, you've got the elder brother who still remains quite stoic in opposing the war, like his father, despite his father having to go to prison. Then you've got Shami, I believe his name is. Shini, I'll have to check that. Wait, check the video in a minute. Shinny, who then goes the other way and becomes very patriotic, believes that people who speak out against the government are traitors. And then you have Yuri, who seems to be, I suppose, in the middle. She's a bit indifferent to the political side of it. She's more worried about the effect on her family. And that's really interesting. But also the relationship between Yuri and the little people. The little people depend on the big people, but they seem quite cold. They almost punish the big people for not looking after them. And that was a really interesting relationship. And Yuri, it was never really clarified whether these big people like Yuri were doing it because they felt it was their duty, because all the Moriyama family had done it, or whether they were actually doing it because they had a deep-seated care and love for the smaller people. That was a really interesting dynamic as well. But I thought those two families growing up in very different ways was a really interesting parallel. Even though it's fantasy, you kind of get on board with the fantasy quite quickly, and you just accept it, and you just roll with it, which was really good and really impressive. The second side of it was the writing. Now, to me, I found it quite hard to get into the story. I had to read the beginning a couple of times because the first chapter or so, it whizzes through the sort of build up to the story and runs through about two generations of the Moriyama family and how they came to look after the children. And there's a lot of names thrown at you, there's a lot of story given to you, and it's almost too much, and you have to just give it time. The language itself in the book I found at times quite hard going. The sentence structure and thing made it, for me, quite... I lost track of things a couple of times throughout the book, and I don't know if that's just because it's an older book, and I'm more... You get used to reading children's fiction that's sort of modern children's fiction, or that something was slightly lost in translation when this book was translated from Japanese. I'm not sure, but you got to keep going with it because it still builds these beautiful images within the story. Also, the dialogue I found was quite interesting. I was never made up my mind about it. It seems quite clipped and abrupt sometimes, the dialogue, and it's over like that. And I don't know if that's just showing the relationship of some of the characters, that they don't have this really caring relationship, or at least they don't show it through their words, or if it again is something to do with the translation. But I still think it still builds these wonderful pictures, you know, and the characterization it's almost quite complex. I felt, you know, Yuri as a character, for a long time I thought she was just a bit indifferent. She got upset and she worried about things, but you never felt it was overwhelming. But there was a moment when she's found crying, and it's a sort of off comment, and that's by another child. She's found crying when she thought no one was watching, and that really sort of brought the character, turned it round for me. Just that one moment, I thought that was really powerful. I like the book. It's a fascinating read. I don't think it will be for everybody, if I'm honest. If that sort of historical fantasy, I'm not sure how many books there are out there like that, is your thing, then I think you'll enjoy it. But I would just put the caveat in there that you've got to keep going and give it a chance as you're going. I think probably older year 6 are going to be able to hack this and give that a go. So that is The Secret of the Blue Glass. Make it your next page if those kind of things appeal to you. Until next time, sayonara.